notes on my laptop. Thank you for having me. This is actually the only time I have been asked to speak during a worship service. I was sitting in the back row, and Virgil said, "Hey, Andrew, you want to speak at KuyperCon?" And really, when it comes from the pulpit, there's not really an answer other than yes. I'd love to pray. Whether you need it or not, I know I do. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity to get together. I pray that you would bless our time, that you would give us wisdom, that we would seek to glorify your name in everything that we do, and that you would give me the words that would be a blessing to everyone here. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, just a bit of a roadmap on what I'm going to try and accomplish. You have 5 talks, which means you're actually stuck with me for 3 full hours. I'll try and make that as entertaining as possible, but no guarantees. And if you want to throw rotten fruit or just walk out and leave, I will not be offended. It's happened to me before. So we have 2 talks tonight. The first one, I want to talk about kind of the theology of work, why you should work, how you should think about your vocation. Hopefully it'll be somewhat applicable to children who are thinking about what their vocation is going to be and what they're going to do with it. The second talk we're going to do tonight, I want to talk about stories. The Bible is chock full of stories. And unfortunately, you're stuck with my story because it's a story I know very well. But I'm going to talk through, I've sold businesses 6 different times. Timothy's been involved with me on several of those. And so I actually want to talk through the stories of building businesses, what went into the decision-making process of selling, what we learned from that, why we did it, all of those things. So that's really what I'm going to accomplish. So we're going to do kind of talk about work, then we're going to talk about stories. Tomorrow, I want to talk, and so tomorrow you need to think about there's 5 talks, and there's you guys know the concept of a chiasm. It's an odd number of things, and there's like this peak in the middle where there's 5 talks. The middle talk is Timothy's, so that is the one you really want to be strapped in for. So tell your friends and family, come for the 9 a.m. talk tomorrow. Then you can go out and have coffee for my talks. It'll be fine. So, but for tomorrow, I want to talk about ambition in the morning. Like, what does godly ambition look like? It is hard for Christians to really be ambitious because our culture tells us not to. So I'm going to talk about that, and then I want to get very practical and talk about how to start a business, why to start a business, and how to run a business. So there's your roadmap. So if you're trying to figure out what talks you're going to come to, and the answer is not all of them, now you know which ones to come to. So today I want to talk about work. Dorothy Sayers says, "Work is not primarily a thing one does to live, but the thing one lives to do. It is, or should be, the full expression of the worker's faculties, the medium in which he offers himself to God." Okay? We're in a culture today where people, and I'm going to hit on 3 things that I think are going after work today. We're in a culture today where work is a thing that you're doing just to make enough money to retire, or you're just doing because you got to put food on the table. People don't see, they've lost the theology of work, the ability to see work as a good unto itself. It's not an end unto a means of vacations or retirement or a fancy car. It is a good unto itself. So that's what Dorothy Sayers says. And since this is KuyperCon, I think it would be inappropriate for me to not quote Abraham Kuyper. There is not a square inch in the whole domain of our human existence over which Christ, who is our Savior overall, does not cry mine. And I think that includes work, that includes business, and I think too many Christians have kind of shrunk away from those specific things. Now, why is this so important? Well, I'm going to hit the first thing, I'll say the first assault on work in the Christian world today. The average retirement age in America is 66 years old, okay? The average life expectancy in America is it's 79.4. We'll call it 80 years old. So there's a 14-year gap where people are retired. And we all know someone, the whole goal of their working life is to stop working, right? And so think of the amount of skills, ability, and knowledge that are being spent not working. Now, there is a transition, like my dad doesn't have a job anymore, but he works all the time. So it doesn't mean that you need to have an 8-to-5 job once you've gotten past that 66. But it is a mindset shift that the point of work is not to stop working. The point of work, as Dorothy Sayers, it is you're not just working to survive, it is what God has given you to do. And in fact, when a lot of people think about retirement, what are they trying to do during retirement? Well, most people are like, I'm going to play golf, I'm going to get a motor home, I'm going to spend my grandkids' retire, I'm going to spend all their money and be totally broke when I hand it to them. And they're really looking for amusement. They're trying to amuse themselves, whether it's movies or golf or whatever they're doing. And I think we actually live in a culture full of amusement, right? You're working so that you can afford to go to the movies or do these other things you want to amuse yourself. But think about that word a little bit. Muse. Does everybody know what a muse is? Right? That's where you get your creativity, your ideas, right? When the muse strikes, whether you're an author or a painter or whatever, a muse is where you get your creativity. It's where you go out and create things in the world. Well, what is amusement? When you put in front of something, it means the opposite of the muse, right? And so amusement, when we work so that we can go do amusement, we are saying we are working so we can stop being creative, so we can stop creating in the world that God has given us. And that is a culture, whether it's YouTube or movies or all these other things. And I'm not saying you shouldn't take vacations, you shouldn't play golf. I love playing golf. But what I'm telling you is we have a culture that the point of work for them is this amusement, which is this counter-muse, this lack of creativity, this lack of creation in the world. And what's interesting is because, I'll say my generation, the generation older than me, has focused so much on not working. I'm going to work so that I can stop working. I'm going to work so I can amuse myself. I'm going to work so I can go on vacation. The next generation has learned that lesson so well, they thought, well, why don't I just start with that part? Right? So we have 3.5 million men between 25 and 35 years old in America who are not even trying to get a job. They're not participating in the labor market at all. They're in their parents' basement playing video games, jacked up on opioids. 3.5 million men, right? That is the most critical part of your entire career. It's where you build relationships. It's where you learn how to do business. Like, think of that 25 to 35-year-old. Think of yourself. What did you accomplish during that time period? Well, what if you weren't working at all during that time period? 3.5 million men in America are currently in that state. If you look at labor force participation, I used to run an economics firm, so I'll try not to totally bore you with economic stats. Labor force participation is how many people who are alive who are participating in the labor force. So in America today, about 62% of all able-bodied people are working. They're in the labor force. That's your labor force participation. And that makes sense. You've got a lot of moms who could be working. You've got people in college who aren't working. You've got people who are maybe retired not working. So that's a reasonable stat for 16 to 19-year-olds. I will tell you that when I've talked to businesses all over the country, what are the top skill those businesses want? They want soft skills. They want the ability to look someone in the eyes, shake their hand, do something that they said they're going to do it on time, actually be reliable and honest, right? Those soft skills are generally come from the family originally, but then they're learned on that first job at McDonald's, right? When you are actually having to make that stupid hamburger or look someone in the eyes or make change, like that's when a lot of soft skills are developed for people, and it's that 16 to 19-year-old swath. In 1978, 59% of 16 to 19-year-olds were in the labor market. That was the labor market participation rate. 59% in 1978. What do you think it is today? It is 33% of 16 to 19-year-olds actually have their first job. And part of that is when you have minimum wage laws, that's going to make it so that people can't get that first job because it's not worth the risk because they're too expensive. But it also is just this mindset around work. They don't want to work. The low was actually in 2020 where we dipped below 30% participation rate for those 16 to 19-year-olds. And so they're not gaining those soft skills. Then they're going to go to their parents' basement and play video games, and we wonder why our economy is not humming right along, right? Because our economy is really the sum total of the labors of all the people that are here. We're in a knowledge-based economy. It's not just production. It's the creativity that all of us are putting into the economy. Because we're made in the image of God, we should be creating all the time. I always hate it when economists talk about consumers and like, well, the U.S. consumer index is down. Well, we're not just consumers, we're creators. We have two hands and one mouth. We should be creating way more than we are consuming. We aren't just consumers, we're creators because we understand that we're made in the image of the Creator God. And when we get that in our heads, then work is a good unto itself. We are a mini creator following the great Creator, and that is the point of what we're trying to do for work. Now, what is this producing in the labor market right now? So when those people finally do get a job, when their parents kick them out or welfare stops paying them or whatever it is, they go into the job. Since 2020, not that long ago, according to a poll from Gallup, there are an additional 4.8 million Americans who are not engaged, according to their definition, not engaged at work. 4.8 million Americans since 2020 went from engaged to not engaged at work. So they still have a job. There's this concept called quiet quitting, where you actually just show up and do the absolute minimum possible. There's this concept, we've always heard the concept of underemployed, so you have like a master's degree in psychology and you're a barista. That's technically underemployed, so you have more skills than you necessarily would have, right? There's also this concept of overemployed. And there's a huge Reddit group that talks about their overemployment. What is overemployment? You have multiple full-time jobs, and you have a laptop from each one of your companies. You're in a work-from-home environment. You are doing the absolute minimum to not get fired on all of them, but you're not actually moving the ball forward on any of them. But you are collecting for full-time salaries, right? And there are hundreds of thousands of people who are doing that. So we have this work environment that's just terrible. In fact, only 30% of full-time employees, according to Gallup, are actually engaged at work because they want to work. Think about that. Only 30% of full-time and part-time employees in America, according to Gallup, are actually engaged at work. And what is this producing on the other side? So Red Balloon, which is my company, I'll talk about it a little bit later, it does this Freedom Economy Index where we ask thousands of businesses all kinds of questions about how their employment's going, how they think of Gen Zs, how do they think of Gen Xers, what's it like to hire these people. Well, 1 in 4 business owners say that their exhaustion level with managing their employees and getting them to work is a 10 out of 10. So 1 out of 4. And another 35% said it's an 8 or a 9 out of 10. Their exhaustion level of just trying to get people to work, right? So this is the problem we want to talk about. And that's why we're having this conference, because it is a big problem, and it's a problem that affects all of us here. So why should we work? Right? So there's all these problems. Now that I'm a doom and gloomer, I'm like an economist, on the other hand, it's going to be terrible. Why should we work? Well, here's a quote from David Bahnsen, who wrote a book called Full Time. And if you want a book on work, I would recommend that. It's a great book. He's a good friend. He says, the default view of the secular culture and the church has been that our identities are not tied to what we do. Our human values, we are told, is unconnected to any aspect of what we offer society vocationally, professionally, or productively. Our identity and value exist in something ethereal, separate from the physical and metaphorical reality. This is, of course, utter nonsense. We don't hesitate to define our heroes by what they have done, and for a good reason. The idea that a person can be metaphorically separate from what they do and have done is fantastical. Now, he's not saying that we don't have value based on our relationship with Christ. Absolutely, that's where our value is. But what you accomplish in the world, what God has given you, you think of the guy with the 10 talents, right? He was given the talents, you're all given different talents, and what he produced was what he was valued by. He says, great, you took those 10 talents, you made 10 more talents, so I'm going to go put you in charge of these cities, right? He was valued based on the production that he gave to the world. And so that's what we're called to do. So the real question is, why should we work? Well, because God told us to, right? That should always be our first answer to any of these questions. Like, does the Bible tell us to work? Yes. Then we should work. And we should not avoid work as though it's a bad thing that we're just trying to earn the minimum amount so that we can stop working. It is to work as unto the Lord. We are made in the image of God, and we're told to follow Christ. We're told to be Christ-like in the way that we do things. Well, what did God do for the first 6 days? Well, he worked. What happened in the Garden of Eden before sin? Well, Adam was told, tend the garden. Sounds like work to me, right? So no matter what you think about work, God tells you to work. So it's a good thing. We should do it. So also, then how are we supposed to think about work as a Christian? And the Reformation gave us actually some really good language around vocation. And obviously, vocation was known before the Reformation, but vocation is actually the concept that your work is not just a job, It's not just a 9-to-5 hobby. It is a thing that you do because it's what God called you to do out in the world. In fact, John Calvin said, he says, the Lord bids each one of us in all of life's actions to look at his calling. Each individual has its own kind of living assigned to him by the Lord as a sort of sentry post, so that he may not needlessly wander throughout life. We're given a sentry post. This is what we're supposed to do so we don't wander around life. And John Calvin's basically saying, like, the work is good for your soul. Like, we need it. It's not just that we're working to bless other people, which you are. We're not just working because God calls us to do it, which he has. We're doing it because it's good for our souls. We need to work. It is a sentry post so we won't wander throughout life. The Lord's calling is the beginning and the foundation of well-doing. No task will be so sodded and based, provided you obey your calling to do it. That will not shine and be reckoned very precious, and it will shine and be very precious in the sight of God. John Calvin actually talks different than I do, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. So, we are called to do this. It's good for our souls. It is the thing that we do that anchors us to every other aspect of our life. So, if you're a young person here, you're like, okay, cool, vocation. Sounds pretty fancy. Is working in a fast food restaurant vocation? Is cleaning a house vocation? Like, I can't go out and get the CEO job as a starting job that I want to do. So, if you're a young person, I want you to think about vocation like this. Sometimes you just got to chop the wood that's in front of you. Cleaning your room, doing your homework, might just be your vocation today. But when you think about your vocation long term, I want you to think about a Venn diagram. Venn diagram is where you have those three circles, that kind of overlap, and there's a spot in the middle. Does everybody know what a Venn diagram? Circle, circle, circle. If you don't, go ask your parents what a Venn diagram is. It's really easy to draw. Venn diagram. Okay, now think about it. There's three different circles here. One of them is something that you're good at, right? I'm pretty good at, actually not very much. But anyway, find things you're good at. I'm pretty good at Excel spreadsheets. Let's say that. Okay, so things that you're good at, things you enjoy. I enjoyed playing baseball, but I wasn't that good at it. So it was over here in the enjoy area, but there's definitely an overlap of things I enjoy and things I'm good at. And then the third circle is something people will pay you to do, right? So if you can find something that crosses on those middle two, you're going to have a really great time and be broke, right? I really enjoy this. I'm really good at it. Nobody will pay me to do it. You're going to be broke, right? If you find something that you're good at and someone will pay you to do, well, it's a job. And sometimes, Adam sinned, therefore work is hard. That's okay. It's a hard thing to do. And if you find something that you really enjoy, but you're not that good at, but someone will pay you to do, you probably aren't going to make very much money, right? But if you find something right in the middle, find something that crosses all three of those circles, that's when you're going to have a vocation that you just love, right? And I know there's these sayings, if you love your work, you don't work a day in your life because you really enjoy it. That's not entirely true because Adam did sin, and so work is actually cursed. So work's always hard. That's okay. But if you can find something that's in that center spot, something you're good at, something you enjoy, and something someone will pay you to do because there's market value to it, you will have a very meaningful and happy vocation. Does that make sense? Okay, so when you're a young person, you're thinking about what am I going to do with my life? Think about those three circles. What are the things that I do anyway on my free time if I had the opportunity? What are the things that I happen to actually be really good at? And what will someone pay me to do? You find that sweet spot, you're going to find a very fulfilled career. Make sense? Okay? Great. We're going to keep moving along. And as a side note, this is part of the reason I started Red Balloon. Because what do I like to do? I like to help people find jobs. I happen to be good at technology things, and I think I can make money doing it. Ta-da! There you go. I'll talk more about Red Balloon later. So you have to come back if you want to hear more about that. So I would say the first attack on work in our culture is this attack, and I think it's the most fundamental one, is that work is bad. It is to be avoided. Just do the minimum you need to so you don't have to work. You're not actually doing it to fulfill your vocation to God, right? That is a lie. That is a lie from the devil. We should be strapping in, excited about work because it is a good unto itself. The other thing that makes people very upset at work, and the other reason I started Red Balloon, is I'll call it the woke attack on the work culture. So I believe that, if you read Sun Tzu's Art of War, if you're going after a target, you need something that's feasible and strategic, right? Feasible and strategic. So if you wanted to go take New York City for the gospel, that is absolutely strategic. That would be a bit of a lift. If you go after Beauville, Idaho, and we're going to take Beauville and all 25 people that live there for the gospel, probably more feasible, probably not as strategic, right? So if you can find a target that's both strategic and feasible, you should go after that. So I believe that is part of the reason that we've been dealing with all this wokeness in the workplace, because that is a target that is really feasible and strategic. The left has known that, and they've done it all along. Here's a couple of quotes from people that are actually living in this world, in the job seeker world, in the workplace. I've been rejected from employment for being a straight white man. Almost every time I've gotten an interview, I was opted out because I did not identify my race and sex on my application. Another person said I lost a major project because the executive said, I don't want another white male to be leading something. I was forced to discipline workers who did not use another person's preferred pronouns. I had to hire based on skin color. I cannot wear a beautiful cross necklace that my husband got me. I was told to remove the American flag pin from my jacket. I received informal, no, that's not a good one. Never mind. My new manager claimed she was here to solve masculinity in the workplace, and the list goes on and on. Well, why are they doing this? Well, Christians lost their theology of work, and the world was happy to just sashay right in and push their worldview on all of us. And I think that's what happened over the last, call it 20 years. They have been pushing a worldview. They started with neutrality in the workplace, and now they've been pushing a worldview. We do see that swinging back. We see things like DEI that are now illegal. We do see people standing up for what they actually believe in the workplace. These are all really good things, but I actually think that was an intentional attack on something that they thought was both feasible and strategic, because Christians were like, well, I guess I got to be neutral. It's just the workplace. And they're like, oh, great, I will go and take that place. And it is what most of us spend the majority of our waking hours doing, is working. And so they wanted to indoctrinate you. Think about how many hours you spend in church, and you think about how many hours you spend at work, and if they can put you through, I'll call it a DEI liturgy for 40 hours a week, and you only get an hour and a half of Christian liturgy, how do you think that affects the way you think about the world? Right? So, I think that is the second attack. So the first attack is, look, we don't want you to work. We want to have retirement be the point of work. We want vacation to be a point of work. The second one is this all-out attack on the Christian worldview in the workplace and trying to push a woke worldview on that. Clearly, the left knew what they were doing, and they were using it as a way to push a worldview on people. We know this because at Red Balloon, again, I'm sorry, I'm going to talk about Red Balloon a lot, but I think about it a lot, so you're stuck with me. We have had so many thank you notes from perfect strangers who have found a job through Red Balloon, and I get notes like, I just wanted to let you know my husband found a new job through Red Balloon and you saved my marriage. Like, I didn't save your marriage, I just made a website and you found a job. Cool. But she's like, no, because that worldview that was pushed on him, when it's the waters you swim in for 8 to 10 hours every single day, it will dramatically impact the way you think about it. And I talk to so many men who are like, well, I just can't keep my head down during the DEI training. I'm like, no, be careful. It's still affecting you, right? Liturgy is designed to change the way that people think about things. I had a single mom write me and say, I just wanted to let you know I found a new job through Red Balloon. And 3 weeks in, she had two boys. She said 3 weeks in, one of my boys says to me, Mommy, you're not angry anymore. And she's like, oh, man, I'm angry. I was angry, Mommy. But then she's like, I had no idea. And when you have the blinders on because you're doing this for 40 hours a week, you don't realize what an impact it's having on you and every relationship around you, right? So I think it was a very intentional attack. I don't think it was just, oh, this kind of happened. I think the same attack when the public school system, a lot of those other ones. This was an intentional way to push Christians to think differently about work, to be disengaged at work, and to change their worldview. Make sense? I think it was an attack. That's why we did Red Balloon. Timothy's in on that with me as well. Okay, so, and then there's a last attack. And I'm going to call it the AI and automation scare that we're in right now. And you all feel this right now. I was talking to a young man. He's like, I don't know if I want to go study computer science because I'm pretty sure we're not going to need programmers in the future. AI is just going to write all of our code, which I disagree with as a side note. Predictions range anywhere, and this is McKinsey, predictions range anywhere from 9 to 47% of the jobs in the U.S. will be automated and done by computers and machines. McKinsey goes on to estimate that about half of the work currently associated with 157 trillion in wages. I don't know if that's the right number, but anyway, a really big number, okay, globally will become automated. Basically, they're saying AI is going to take over everything, automation is going to take over everything, and what are they doing? Well, in one sense, if you believe that down in your soul, it fundamentally changes your relationship with work, right? And this is me pounding that work thing. Work is a good thing, and if all this automation's coming, well, then, you know, where's my part? What's the point of me working? Well, first of all, I don't think AI is going to do that. I think AI is a productive tool that we have right now in the same way that the internet was. I think there's going to be an AI bubble, the same way that there was an internet bubble. NVIDIA is not going to be worth that much forever. It's impossible. Go down the line. In fact, AI, without going too deep into this, I would recommend Aaron Youngren, who's on the Red Balloon team, just wrote a book on AI from a Christian perspective. I'd encourage you to look at it. AI is a very powerful tool, but the internet needs to be about 100 times bigger for AI to have all the data it needs to really run things effectively. And the internet is getting bigger right now, and it's getting bigger very rapidly, but not based on human data. It's getting bigger based on more AI stuff, which makes it incestuous. And it's not going to have the creativity that human beings have. And in fact, most AI models, if you look at what are the largest repository of human-based writing that's readily available for these large language models, it's Wikipedia and Reddit. That means it's a mess. I'll just tell you that right now. There's a lot of bad junk in AI. But AI is a very powerful tool. But as Christians, we need to not be afraid of AI. We need to not think, AI is going to replace work, because we know God created us to work, to do things, right? All the things we've been talking about. So we know that, and so we just know that AI is going to be a tool. It's going to be a change. It's going to be something that changes the way we work, but we're always going to need to work because God called us to work, and God's still in heaven no matter how many big tech giants are out there, right? Amen? Okay. These are all attacks on work, right? So we talked about the retirement culture of we just are working to not work. We talked about the woke attack on work, and we talked about the AI and automation attack. These are all just attacks on work, but the fundamental view is wrong because God created us to work, and it will totally change your outlook on your vocation when you see it as this is a calling from God that I was told to do. As Calvin said, keep me from wandering. This is my post that I was given to do, and it is glorifying to God to work really hard and do things that are very hard. So we need to start by reorienting ourselves to work. Hard things are good for the soul. I had a young man come to me, and he's like, do I need to finish college? Is college the thing that I need to do for my vocation? And I'm going to give you some kind of scary stats. Back to this Freedom Economy Index that we did, we asked all of our employers, if you see a bachelor's degree from a mainstream university on a resume, is it a positive, a negative, or a neutral? 40% of these small to medium-sized businesses, center right, said, if I see a bachelor's degree from a mainstream university on a resume, it is neutral. 40% of them like, I don't care. It does not matter at all. This is a scary one. 42% said it's a negative if I see that degree on there. And so we asked them, why is that? And they're like, well, why would I want a Marxist that's been trained at an anarchist university for 4 years into my four walls? It's like, well, when you put it like that, I don't want that person either, right? So so here's my shout out to NSA and Liberty, since I know we have some Liberty people here. Like, a Christian education is different, but if you go to a mainstream university, don't assume that it's good for your vocation. Now, what I told that young man is, what's the hardest thing for you? What's the thing that's going to build you up the most? Is it doing the hard thing of school, or is it going and getting a job right now? Because you should probably do whatever's the hardest thing for you, right? And so the point of school is not necessarily vocation. It can be. If you're going to be an accountant and you're going to study that's great. But the point is to make you a better player, or a better person. God cares more about the players than the score, right? You're a player. He doesn't care as much about the score as he cares about how you are building, how your soul is being built up, and how you're becoming a better version of you. That's what God cares about. And if higher education is the thing that's going to do that for you, then you should go get a higher education degree. If higher education is going to take you away from the Lord and turn you into a party animal, you should not do that, right? Straightforward. It's really straightforward. So that's how you should think about your vocation. What's the hardest thing for me? And that goes for higher education as well. God put us here to work. The next thing I would say is, all you parents out there, I want you to build anti-fragile kids. Work is really, really hard. And if they go limp when it gets really, really hard, you have done a bad job. And that term anti-fragile, Nissim Talib, he kind of went COVID crazy, so I wouldn't recommend him on everything, but he did write a book called Anti-Fragile, and in that book he just talks about, so anti-fragile is not tough. Like, you think about like a bowling ball. Bowling balls are hard to break. That's tough, but that's not anti-fragile. And a fragile would be like a china cup, like breaks really easily. Anti-fragile means the harder things come at it, the stronger it gets. And only living things are anti-fragile, right? And when you go through hard times, God always uses persecutions. We see what happened with Charlie Kirk. God always uses martyrs to build up his church. And that's this, the church is this anti-fragile thing. When Yeshua gets fat, what's the quote that faithfulness begot prosperity, and prosperity devoured the daughter, or something like that. That's a paraphrase, but you get the point. When things go really well, it's really easy to get off base and go left and forget what we're trying to do. But when things are hard, that's generally when people do really well. And so my encouragement to you, parents, is you need to build anti-fragile children. That means you need to not just protect and make everything easy for them, because when they get to the real world, everything's really hard. And you want them to want hard things. You want them to be used to hard things. You want them to strive for hard things, because that's how they're going to go succeed at work. Now, all of this should be very encouraging for parents as well. We have a culture of lazy people who go to mainstream university and become Marxists and anarchists, and who are striving to avoid work, and they're playing video games in their basement. Well, how do you think hardworking Christian kids are going to stand against that? Pretty good, right? By contrast, what's the point of dumb people in the world so that we all look smarter? You can quote me on that. Sorry, Annabelle. My daughter's here. There's Annabelle. I would say, as parents, you need to be striving to instill that work ethic and make hard things. Make them do hard things, because that's how they're going to go and conquer the world, right? Okay, so work is a good thing. You know what to do with your vocation. Don't let the woke monsters get after you. AI is not a boogeyman. God is still in heaven. And when you go and work hard, God will bless it. That is just how the world works. It is not intuitive, but this is how God made us. He made us to work. Thank you very much. Round 2, fight. Sorry. Okay, so now that we've gotten to, like, what's the point of work? Why are we going to work? I feel like it's getting late on a Friday night. You'd rather be watching a movie than me, so it's story time. So I'm going to talk about my career and things that I've done. And I'm telling you this not just because I am totally self-obsessed, which I am. It's fine. but also because I hope that sometimes stories are the best way to learn lessons, and I have made more mistakes than many people put together, and so I'm going to talk through some of those. So that's what we're going to talk about now. So quick background, I grew up in the Bay Area. Well, I'm going to go all the way back. Everyone thought I was retarded until I was 6 years old. I'm dead serious. So I was kicked out of the Christian school that my parents had put me in because they thought I should be with the special needs kids. Because it's true. I'm wildly dyslexic, so everything's backwards. So math is easy for me. I can't spell my way out of a wet paper bag. And I had allergies, so I couldn't hear, so I didn't learn to speak till I was 5. And I had one wandering eye that was doing its own little party. And so I had these big Coke bottle glasses, and in kindergarten, I was bad at everything that they wanted me to be good at. So, and all I said was, "What?" Because I couldn't hear them. Anyway, so I got kicked out of school. And it's actually interesting because Malcolm Gladwell did a book on dyslexic kids. So I was not alone. Where they get to kindergarten, they realize they're literally bad at everything the teacher cares about. But the thing they are good at is figuring out how to work with other people. And so there was this executive at Disney that by the 4th grade, he realized he could negotiate up 1 grade, and by the 7th grade, he could negotiate up 2 grades. So as long as he could coordinate his friend Billy to do his homework and get a C, then he could negotiate the teacher to an A, and he didn't have to work at school. Well, actually, those are really important life lessons when you get into business. You're coordinating and negotiating all the time. I'm not going to recommend that. Don't cheat, children. But, yeah, I saw that back row. As a consequence, I ended up being homeschooled, but it also meant that I got my first job when I was 16. It was a full-time job because at 16, I realized I was not going to become a Major League Baseball player. I was good, but not that good. And I just wanted to get to work. I wanted to start earning money. And so as soon as I got my driver's license, I went and worked for a .com doing shipping and receiving. And I could pick up big boxes that the other people couldn't pick up because I've been working out because I played baseball. I had an incredible opportunity to be at a .com in the Bay Area in the 90s, even as a shipping and receiving guy. I was part of a business that was about to go do crazy things, and God was just very gracious and put me there and put me under a Christian man initially who did not care that I did not have a degree. He cared that I worked harder than anybody else, would show up and do amazing things, right? And so I was given opportunities, and I had to take those opportunities by the grace of God. And so started in shipping and receiving when I was 16. By the time I was 17, I was running the shipping and receiving department, mostly because I was the only one who was like sober and showed up and did what I said I was going to do, right? And there's a story for you kids. Stay sober and do what you say you're going to do. Hopefully the first one's easy. So I was running the shipping and receiving department, and then our company, it was a computer automated design company. Kind of boring, but we did 3D CAD software. But what was cool is I looked at all the other engineers and everybody at the company. I'm like, there's no way I can catch up on the knowledge, the skills, and ability that they have. So I guess I'll just keep doing shipping and receiving. But then our company, right in the heart of the Bay Area, bought a company from Atlanta called IronCAD. And it was a new computer automated design software. And I'm like, I am now at ground zero with everybody else. Even if they have 20 years of experience, I now have this competitive advantage of I can outwork them because I don't have to play catch up. We're all learning this software at the same time. So I built myself a server, and I taught myself IronCAD, and I literally worked as many hours as I could stay awake and figured it out. Then I went to the training manager and said, I can teach this software at the ripe old age of 19. I can teach this software. Why don't you give me an opportunity to go out and teach it? He's like, I don't believe you can teach it. I'm like, give me any problem. I can do it in this software. And I did everything faster than everybody else because I was a young guy and had nothing else to do. And they all had busy jobs. So I went on my first business trip when I was 19 years old. I did not bring my razor, and it didn't matter because I didn't actually shave very much. And it's hard to get a rental car as a 19-year-old, as a side note. So there was all these challenges, and then back to Anti-Fragile. But I also learned some really important lessons because when you have to go out and do really hard things like that, and no one's helping you, and you're just kind of on your own, It is a very formative moment. And again, this is back to you parents. Don't overprotect your kids. Put them out in spots where they have to do really hard things, and they might fail. And I did fail. I remember teaching my first class in Chicago, and it was the most boring, horrible class that had ever been taught, and it was a full 8 hours of that. And like people wanted to die. They were like committing carry, whatever the thing is, seppuku. But one of the other employees, one of the salespeople, came to me and said, okay, Andrew, that was horrible. And he was straight up. He's like, that was the worst thing I've ever seen. But you clearly know your software, so let's talk about how to get more engaging. And he literally sat down with me for hours and walked through the whole thing. By the grace of God, that was one of those moments when you invest in someone and it worked out. Anyway, I got very good at training. I got to go all over the world doing this. And in fact, I started going to, I was continued to do, and this is what I was blessed to be part of a fast-growing .com in the Bay Area when people did stuff, right? And they're like, hey, we don't care if you have a degree. You're 20 years old. Why don't you go to Tokyo and build our VAR program, our value-added reseller program? I'm like, really? Sure, let's do this thing. So ended up growing a lot, learning a lot. I also learned what venture capital money does to a business. We were a successful business earning a couple $1 million a year, plugging along, and then the .com craze hit the Bay Area. So we took $32 million of venture capital money, and we changed our budget from $2 million of profit a year to $8 million of loss a year. We were trying to grow as fast as possible and spend the money as fast as possible. And getting a front row seat, I wasn't on the executive team, but getting a front row seat to the decisions that are made when you have that kind of steroids hit your business and you now have to grow at almost any cost was incredible. I learned about budgeting. I learned about what happens when you go play, $1,000 rounds of golf in Tokyo because why not? I turned 21 on an expense account. I remember the first bottle of wine that I ordered at a restaurant. I'm like, I don't know, this one at the bottom. It's only $500. Let's do it. So, not recommended. But these are the stories. This is how you build. This is how you get built as a person, and you start to enjoy work. You're like, hey, I can go out and do these things, right? Okay, so fast forward, doing all this stuff, ripe old age of 22. I'm working 80-hour weeks, and I've been doing that for years. And I just got burned out. I was like, I don't have a girlfriend. I don't have a life. What's the matter with me? So moved up to Moscow, Idaho. Now you know the background. That's where why I got to Moscow. And I moved to Moscow because I just wanted a good church. I'd been going to a church in San Francisco, an OPC church. And Chuck McElhenney was the pastor, and he spoke out against homosexuality. And in San Francisco, that's not popular. And so we literally had to fight through a picket line every Sunday morning to get into church. And there were people who were like banging drums during the sermon. Like it was crazy times. He had his house firebombed. Remember the left really is the violent group. So, but there were some weird things in the church. So we moved up to Moscow, decided to go to Doug Wilson's church. It was amazing. But then I got to Moscow and found out, guess what? There aren't any good jobs here. You're either working at Walmart, you're working at the hospital, or you're working at the university. And that was kind of it. And I think the hurts were there right when I got there. And there weren't jobs. So people would come, they'd go to NSA or whatever, and then they'd leave because there really wasn't an opportunity to stay. I'm like, okay, well, God gave me these crazy experiences in the Bay Area. What should I do with them? This is the skills, the knowledge, and ability that I've been given by God. How should I use it to bless other people? Well, if I want a job, I bet other people want a job. So I should make jobs. Ta-da, it's not that hard. The nice part about being stupid is you think, it can't be that hard. I'll just make a business and make a ton of jobs. And sometimes God blesses that. So not knowing what you shouldn't be able to do is actually a huge blessing sometimes. So I got connected with these two economists who had this labor market data company. And just to be honest, like you always think like the first day at a cool startup, even in Moscow, there's these two economists. They have customers, they have product market fit, they've got a lot of things. I'm like, guys, you guys have a real business here. And they're like, oh, that's cool. Do you want to run it? I'm like, sure. And so first day on the job, I'm like, okay, so I'm hooking up my computer under the desk, and we had these little dividers. I don't know if you remember those. If you're old like me, you will. They were these like fabric dividers. Anyway, I bumped my head against it. It fell over. It made this huge boom. One of the economists jumps up and he's like, Andrew, are you dead? And I'm like, no, I'm just under the desk. And so he's trying to put this thing back up. And the other economist was a total hippie, and he had ferns hanging all over the office. And so the first economist, Shell is his name, Kjell. He's from Norway. Anyway, he's trying to get this fern off. He didn't know that Hank, the other economist, had just watered the darn thing. And it was like on those 4 wires, and it was hooked to like the drop ceiling. Anyway, so every time he picks it up, the wires flex, doesn't go anywhere. Finally gets it to unhook, but it only unhooks those 2 sides, and this like mud flood comes down on his. And he grabs this thing, he rips it off, and the ceiling's like, ring, and I'm like, and he throws it in the car, he's like, I'm out of here! And he leaves, and I'm like, this is my first day on the job. It's amazing. It's going to be awesome. So anyway, so that's how MZ started. And it turned into a bigger, better thing later on. But what we saw was we had an opportunity to be a blessing to this community. I saw we had a product that customers around the country wanted. We had an opportunity to get money from outside of the region to bring it into Moscow. And I had this heart for the labor market. I had the heart for, like, how do we create jobs in this silly little town? We understood doctrine in a lot of ways. There were a lot of academics in Moscow, people reading big, heavy books, but you got to pay for stuff, right? We need money to do stuff. And you get money by creating jobs, and not just jobs where you're barely paying the bills, but jobs where you have disposable income, where you can go out to dinner, because I love to eat, which you can probably tell from a distance. And I knew that if we had good, high-paying jobs, we would have better restaurants, because then people would earn enough money to go out to dinner. They would afford restaurants, ta-da. So that was really my heart. So when we started MZ, my initial goal was 50 people earning over $50,000 a year, 50 at 50. And I did that, and that is a terrible business goal, as a side note, because you can go bankrupt, and I nearly did, getting to 50 at 50. You can hire a bunch of people, but you have to make money to pay them, turns out. Found that out later. That's where Timothy came in. But we had this goal of 50 at 50. How do we create prosperity in our town by creating jobs that are going to be meaningful for families, right? That was really what we were trying to do. And we were doing it with labor market data, which I know sounds really boring, but it actually is tied into that, because if you have labor market data, which is the ability to know what you should do with your career, what you should do with your education, think about how much decision-making information, decision-ready information is on your phone about where you should go to dinner tonight. Can you go on a vacation? Can you afford a house? Can you get a mortgage? What should your career be? What's the skill that you could add to your basket of competencies that would get you the highest raise at your job right now? There's not really good information on that. Or what professors should I go to? What skills should I get in college that are going to create the highest economic return for me as an individual? There's not good data on all of that. So that was what we were trying to do. Create that data, and in the process, bless the Moscow economy, right? And that's the heart of what business is about. I describe business like this. And when we're going to talk about why you should start a business later. But think about business like this. If you want to take a meal to a family in the church, which I think is a really good thing, they have a baby, you bring them meals. That's a great thing. Well, if you wanted to do that for one family, it's cool. If you want to do it for 20 families every night, you're going to go broke and your wife's going to die, right? Both bad outcomes. But how do you do that? Let's say you actually want to take meals to 20 families every single night. Let's say you want to take meals to 1 million families every single night. Well, it's called DoorDash, right? You use the friction of commerce, the friction of business to bless people at scale. That's what business is at the end of the day. It's an opportunity to take a good thing and bring it to scale so that you can bless more people. It's blessing at scale, right? If I wanted one kid who was in a community college to have the information they needed to understand what career they should pursue that matches that Venn diagram of vocation, that'd be great. And I could go and spend a ton of time and energy doing that. But with business, I had the opportunity to build data scientists and user interfaces so I could help 1 million people, right? And that's when you think of business, it's not this evil thing. It's a wonderful thing. It's an opportunity to bless people at scale. That's fundamentally what business is. So that's what we were trying to do at MZ. We were trying to bring prosperity to the Moscow economy, and we were trying to bless people with this data at scale, okay? As we continued this, two of our engineers actually came up with a student information system now called Populi within the business, and they came to me and they're like, we're engineers, we don't know how to run the business, do you want to buy the business? I'm like, yeah, sure. So we bought the business and then we incubated inside of MZ. I don't know if that was the best plan, but we did, and actually I have some more thoughts I want to share in a second on that. So we incubated this business inside of MZ, which was great, but it also meant that we were barely profitable all the time because we were also incubating this not profitable business inside of MZ. At about this time, the two economists, Hank and Shell, were ready to retire. And I know I just talked about retirement. I'm not going to make any judgments on what they should have done or not, but they wanted to not be part of that business anymore. And so I thought there's two things that kind of went into my initial decision to sell the business. One, they each owned about 33%, and I owned 33% of the business. And they wanted to get out, and I couldn't afford to buy them out. I didn't have the money for that. And I also, not to be prideful, I knew more about business than anybody else I knew in Moscow. There weren't just lots of business people in the community. There were lots of very wise men, very godly men, but not a lot of business people who understood renewal rates and gap revenue and all these other things that are really helpful. So we went through a process and sold the business, ended up selling it to a private equity firm out of Palo Alto, back to my roots. And that's about the time that Timothy, I was fortunate enough to bring in someone who knew that there were two A's in GAAP. I didn't know that before, but that was kind of cool. GAAP accounting, anyway, it's an accounting joke. Went over about as well as most accounting jokes do. Sorry. So anyway, we sold to a private equity firm out of Palo Alto, which was actually a great experience. And I'm just going to throw out numbers. They bought it for like $8 million. I also learned that they knew how to structure deals because they bought it for about $8 million. They put $4 million of their own dollars in. They let me hold on to a percentage of it, so they didn't pay $8 million because they only bought their, whatever it was, 72% of the business. And then they put debt on the rest of it. And I'm like, why would you put debt on this? You have enough money to just buy the thing. Why wouldn't you just buy the thing? But they're like, nope, this is how we structure the deal. So they put $4 million of their own cash in, call it $2.5 million of debt on the business. And guess who provided the debt? Well, they did. And they provided a 12% interest because they were buying the business. They had a majority. They could just decide, I'm going to charge 12% interest, and you're going to pay it. And guess what? The business paid that debt. So I was like, oh, interesting. That's an interesting way to structure this deal. They're basically making it so, and they could go and get that debt for like 6%. They charged us 12% because they had enough assets that they could get cheaper access to debt. And so now they're getting higher interest. They're making money on the interest, and they just have this piece of debt. Well, fast forward 2.5 years, and it was like an MBA. I learned a ton from those guys. They were frustrating at times. We didn't see eye to eye on worldview, all of those things. Fast forward 2.5 years, and we sold the business for $40 million. Okay, so how did that work out? Well, they paid off the debt piece, which was only $2.5 million, and against $8 million, that felt like a lot. Against $40 million, it's a rounding error, like it's a small amount of money, and we've been making payments on it from the profits of the business for 2.5 years. Okay, so that debt's gone down, but they still own the majority of the business for only the $4 million that they put in, right? They even let me earn some ownership through performance. They let other people earn ownership through performance. Anyway, they got 6.8 times their money in 2.5 years doing it that structure. Because if they had put in the full $6 million rather than doing the debt component, they would not have had that kind of multiple on their money because they would have had to put in more money and they would have gotten the same ownership. But using that debt component, and it was just, this is, when you get into the business world, you're like, oh, that makes sense. But until you actually walk through those scenarios, it's really hard to understand. And this is where I think Christians need to learn from the, children of light are not as wise as the children of darkness. Like, they know how to use money. I've also talked to a lot of business people who are like, man, I can't wait to sell my business. I'm building to sell my business. In retrospect, fast forward, now 20 years, MZ, now Lightcast is probably, I don't know the numbers, so this is not an official declaration, but probably producing $40 to $50 million a year in profit, in cash profit, right? Well, that's pretty cool. Think about if I still owned that, or if I and two economists still own that. we could literally build a cathedral every single year. Like, that's the scale of business, right? And so when people buy it and they're like, wow, they just paid a ton of money for my business. Yeah, well, they're not idiots. They're doing it for a reason, right? And so anyway, so we continue to grow the business. We look for opportunities. How do we bless people at scale? And those private equity guys actually were really helpful. They gave us a lot to push for. The other thing we had to do in business at this moment is we realized, okay, we have pagan bosses on our board. How do we be distinctly Christian in this moment? Because this is one of the huge advantages. If I just owned the business and I hadn't had pagan bosses who were very savvy Bay Area business guys, I would not have had to grapple with, okay, how do I make a culture that is our own? That is a thing that we actually believe in as Christians. And I think so many Christians have abdicated that culture building inside of their business. And I think there is an opportunity to do stuff really important. So there's a couple things that we did, and Timothy was part of this, where we thought, okay, how do we articulate the culture that we're going to build so that we are distinctly Christian, even if we're not owned by a Christian business? So the first thing we said is, what are the 3 principles that are going to drive all of our decision making? In business, there's a million different things you can do, and so you can make really bad decisions at scale, which is great, but you want to be able to see through the fog, and the best way to do that is have values and principles that you're using for business. For us, it was, we want to bless our customers. We want every customer to be better off because they interact with us, whether they buy anything or not. And this had an impact on customer service. When you're talking to someone, our job is to bless that customer, not just get money from them. We're not seeing them as an invoice number. We're not seeing them as a customer number. They're someone we want to bless. We want them to be better off because they interact with us, whether they buy anything or not. Well, it's interesting when you set out that principle for all of your employees and you talk about it literally every single week, it changes behavior at your organization. And all of a sudden, the point of business is to bless those customers. And oh, by the way, we make a bunch of money, right? But if our first focus is to bless those customers, it totally changes the way you interact with people, changes the way you innovate, it changes the way you think about renewal rates. All these things flow from blessing customers. And it's so funny because blessing is like this dog whistle word, because if you use the word blessing, it's a fine word, but every Christian's like, oh, I know what's going on. That's a word. That's a Christian word, right? I mean, they know it, right? And so this was a thing that we could do. We're like, bless the customer. And then the next one, bless the employee. We want every person at our company to be a better person because they work here, okay? And that had dramatic ramifications. First of all, I would say things like, hey, I want you to be a better employee here, and I want you to be a better employer for your next employer, better employee for your next employer. In fact, I would encourage you, I will be a reference for you if you ever need to go and get another job somewhere else. I'm trying to bless you. I want you to be a better person. Go make a ton of money. Do whatever you want. Turns out that produces an enormously high retention rate. People don't leave when you say, you're welcome to go, right? They don't feel trapped. They feel like, okay, this is a place I want to be. And then I would explain to people, and here are some of the ways that I want you to think about bless the employee. Because not only is that on me, is that on the board, but it's also on all of you to bless your fellow employees. So we're already blessing our customers. Customers come first, employees come second. It also means that there's going to be behavior that we are going to follow at this business that is blessing to all of you. So first one, we do not stand for gossip in this business. If you have something to say to someone, you say it to their face, and if you don't, you might be fired. So I would tell new employees, if you come to my office and you say, hey, Andrew, you're really screwing up and doing a really bad job as a CEO, I might give you a raise. Because I have blind spots, I need people who have the guts to speak into the CEO's life like that and say, hey, you're missing the boat on this, right? And so you might get a raise. But if you come into my office and say, so-and-so, they're just not cutting it. I think that you maybe should, let them go. I don't know what to do with them. You might get fired if you do that, because that's just gossip. That's going around their back. And often I would have employees who come in my office and say, I'm really worried about so-and-so. I'd be like, hold on 1 second. Go and come back. And I bring that person in. I'm like, why don't the 3 of us talk through this right now? Well, tell you what, that's super awkward. I love awkward. It's kind of my superpower. I mean, my last name's Crapuchettes, for crying out loud. So I love awkward, and guess what? It doesn't happen anymore when you do that. And often it's just political maneuvering that was happening. And you nip that sucker in the bud, and guess what? Innovation comes. Because everybody knows no one's going to talk behind my back. I can come up with a stupid idea, and someone's going to tell me directly. And what they say, every good business idea comes from 9 stupid ideas, right? So you got to have a bunch of stupid ideas, and then they triangulate into like, oh, wait, this might work, right? And so innovation comes when you know that people have your back. The other aspect of bless the employee was you realize I, as a CEO, am not just managing people. I'm managing everlasting souls. These are people that we're going to spend eternity with. Well, that changes the way you think about it, right? I had one employee who lied to a customer, and I had to fire him that day. And I said, we just don't, bless the customer. That's the first one. You lied to a customer. You did it intentionally. You got to go right now. Turns out that very stiff conversation that I had with him was exactly what he needed as a person. Because I found out several months later that his marriage was in really bad shape. And he just had this pattern of lying. And I was the only person that had this lever in his life that he had to listen to because he just lost his job. And that was the kick in the pants that God used me to give him to fix the things in his life that he needed to fix. And we're actually good friends now, even though I had to fire him. I had another employee who had an anger problem. And it's funny how sin doesn't stay in nice, tidy buckets. If you have an anger problem, it's going to show up at work. And he yelled at someone. I said, so this is 2 strikes, you're out. I'm going to give you 1 chance on this, but you need to deal with this all the way down. Go get pastoral help. Whatever you need to do, this anger problem will destroy your career, and it is not welcome here. We are a bless the customer, bless the employee business. You need to deal with this anger problem. Same thing. His marriage was actually in not great shape because he wasn't dealing with that anger problem. And multiple pastors had talked to him before. But I had this lever of signing his paycheck. And suddenly he had to listen to me. And he actually dealt with that sin all the way down. Right? Now, I can't deal with sin that has no impact on the work world. Right? I'm the boss. I'm not the pastor. Pastors have a different job. But you do, as a boss, when you're thinking, I'm going to bless the employee, I'm going to think about this person as an everlasting soul, it changes the way you interact with those people, right? Does that make sense? And so those are the first 2 principles. So first we want to bless the customer. Next we want to bless the employee. And there's lots of these ramifications that come from that. And then the last one is we want to bless the shareholder. And people are like, well, shareholders, that, dirty capitalism. No, I am a man under authority. I had a board. I had shareholders. I had people who had invested. And I cannot expect people underneath me to do what I ask them to do or do what I tell them to do. I mean, there's this 1-to-1 correlation. I sign your paycheck, you do what I say, right? That's just how the world works, right? But if you want people to really love taking direction, taking authority, you need to realize you need to be under authority. The person who will not take correction, will not take any input from someone above them, is a terrible manager almost all the time. And so that's why we wanted to bless the shareholder. We wanted to say customers are first, employees are second, but shareholders are on the list. Now, there's still number 3. We're not about just making money. And it's funny how God built the world. When you focus on things other than just making money, you make a ton of money. That's just how it works. And so we focused on taking care of our customers, taking care of our employees. Shareholders always did really well. And I always talked about the shareholders because I wanted everyone to know I'm under authority and you're under my authority. That's how it works. And it's okay. Okay? So having those Palo Alto owners forced us to really think through those things. Like, how are we going to be distinctly Christian in the way that we run this business? And those are the principles we use. And there were lots of ramifications. I won't go into all of them. That we, whenever I had a new employee come in or a new potential employee come in, I would interview them. And I'd say, by the way, I'm an unapologetic conservative Christian CEO. Here are the ramifications of that. It's not a prerequisite. It's not a weird thing. Everyone is welcome, but I don't want you to come in with some weird conception of what you're coming into. I'm probably going to pray at the company dinner. That's what you're coming into. You're totally welcome. I just don't want you to be blindsided by this. Well, that actually was a cool legal protection because it's like the contents of this cup might be hot, the McDonald's thing, and then if you spill it on your lap, they're like, we told you it was hot. And the CEO's hot. Get it? Sorry. Okay, let's keep moving along. So we continued to grow the business. We actually ended up selling it. So 2.5 years in, I'd learned a lot from the private equity guys. They were wonderful, but I kind of had learned what we were going to learn from them. And the private equity play, for those who don't know, private equity buys a business. They invest in the business a lot to grow the top line. They don't care about the margins. And then about 2.5 to 5 years in, depending on their strategy, they then start cutting costs like mad so that the margin just goes crazy. And then they sell the business on a multiple of that margin. Does that make sense? So that's kind of the play. So 2.5 years in, we started to get this weird behavior from them. They're like, yeah, I don't know if we want to pay for that. I don't know if we should hire another developer and actually innovate for the customer. I'm like, hold on. I care about blessing the customer, blessing the employees, and then blessing the shareholders. And they're like, yeah, I don't know if we're on the same page here. I'm like, yeah, probably time to go. So we went out and found another business to buy us. And I'll just be honest, I spearheaded that. And they weren't looking to sell us. We had a great partner in CareerBuilder, the big job board. And so I just went to CareerBuilder and I said, hey, you should buy us. And they're like, well, how much do you? And I said, I bet they'd take $40 million. And they're like, okay, let's do it. It was a little more complicated than that, but honestly not that much more complicated than that. So we became part of CareerBuilder. The Palo Alto guys, still good friends, made a ton of money. So now we are part of this huge organization full of pagans. And so we really needed to double down on what are we doing with our culture, how are we thinking about ourselves as distinctly Christian business people, because if we don't, we're going to lose where we're going. And by the grace of God, we did that. We continued to grow. I actually ended up running a division of CareerBuilder for a while, which was a terrible idea that nearly killed MZ. During this time period, Timothy and I did some other things. We did Element Robot, which is a 3D printing business that we sold off to Stryker, got away with our shirts on barely. I think that's, yep. So business doesn't always go amazing. So I'm telling you all these amazing stories. We were with CareerBuilder for 5 years, and then we sold for like $160 million. And then we were with that company until 2020. And that company was actually a nonprofit. It was a weird business. It was great. They had a ton of money. But they were a nonprofit out of Indianapolis, a bunch of Mormons. They were easy to work with until 2020 came around. And then God decided that it was time for me to stop doing the thing that was easy and comfortable. Back to what I told you earlier, whatever's the hard thing, that's probably the best thing for you. And they basically came to me and said, look, we need you to make a statement about George Floyd. We need you to push COVID stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do any of that stuff, so sorry. And then they did a dossier on me and found out I'm a Christian and I go to a church. And then the board basically told me, hey, if you want to keep your job, it's great, but you need to stop being a Christian. If you could just park the Christianity on the weekends, that'd be great. And I'm like, okay, so the whole culture of what we've accomplished here is not that. And you don't understand you were going to shoot the golden goose in the head, right? Where at that point we were growing 25% a year with a 40% margin, right? We were just high growth, high margin, large business, just creating tons of free cash flow for these shareholders. But they cared more about worldview, which is a lesson for a lot of us. Because Christians sometimes are like, well, I'm going to be a smart business person. But they cared more about worldview than cash. And so we basically had this long disagreement. I won't go into all the details, but basically the net was like, you either fire me for being a Christian, and there's going to be a long line of people who are also walking out the door with me, and you're going to have a smoking crater of a business. Door number 2 is Timothy and I are the culture committee for the board, and we get to just decide all that stuff, and you leave me alone on that. Or door number 3 is I go find another person to buy us, because clearly you're not okay with what we've accomplished here. The culture we've built. And so they took door number 3. We went through a last process. This would be the 4th time we sold the business. I found a great buyer. Unfortunately, KKR's ESG fund had more money and outbid that buyer, and guess what? I left because they didn't want anything to do with me. And I'll be honest, like that was a moment where like, okay, I built this thing. I've been here for 20 years. People I love. Like, Lord, what are you doing here? And then I accidentally started Red Balloon. I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but it was an accident. I started it, and we've now helped thousands of businesses, and we've brought hope and jobs to hundreds of thousands of job seekers. And my wife wrote this article, and it was very sweet of her. She's a lot smarter than I am. She wrote an article for the Federalist saying, my husband wasn't fired, he was redeployed. And when the king tells you to go take a new hill, who are you to say no? It's like, oh man, babe, come on. So there you go. That's what I did. We started Red Balloon, and we have been able to bless a lot of people through that. But I'm telling you these stories of business because I want to inspire you. I'm that retarded kid from the Bay Area, literally, who by working really hard, by trying to be faithful, by stumbling along, by surrounding himself with really smart people like Timothy, and I could go on a long list of people who have just been incredible people who I've gotten to build businesses with, have been able to build $100 million businesses to the glory of God. And when I drove, and I remember there was one moment I was driving around the Bay Area right when we sold Emsy the first time, and I don't remember if it was a Dropbox or one of those businesses. I saw their headquarters, and it's like this big, beautiful building. I'm like, daggone it. Why can the pagans build huge businesses like that and push their worldview with everything they've got? And us Christians don't. We serve the Creator God. Like, He made the universe. We should be the ones doing this. We should be the captains of commerce in a Christian way. And so my encouragement to you is, if a dumb kid from the Bay Area can do it, so can you. And if pagans in the Bay Area can build huge businesses, so can you. Tomorrow's talk, I'm going to talk about why ambition is important as Christians. And so that will tie into that nicely. But my encouragement is, there's my story. I don't know what God's story is for you, but I'm really excited what a bunch of inspired people who are trying to be distinctly Christian in what they're doing are going to do to Lynchburg. Thank you. You can ask me anything. How much I weigh, anything. Yes. Yeah. Very much so. Yeah, it's a great question. First of all, I married really, really well. First of all, I was born without tear ducts, so I didn't cry about it. But it was I wasn't born without tear ducts, but I don't generally. I cried when Annabelle was born. There you go. But I realized this was, part of God cares more about the players than the score. My identity was tied up in CEO of Emsy, not in Christ. And I know that sounds like, oh yeah, well, idiot. Well, it's very easy. Like your vocation, this is the thing that I poured my heart and soul into. I loved it. And I think, God was using it to remind me that my identity is in Christ. And that's how it was like, oh, okay, I need to go do something else. When I kind of came to that realization, again, through the wise counsel of my wife, a lot of time in prayer. I also realized my prayer life wasn't as good, and when you lose your job, it gets better. So God's blessing me in that way. Bible reading's better. I got more time to read books. I got smarter, all those things. So, but I think that was the fundamental thing was my identity is not in my job. It's not in my vocation. It's in Christ. And which means that if God says, go take a new hill, you're redeployed to go do something else. Like, yes, sir, I'm on it because my identity's there, not in the vocation. Does that make sense? But that was a multi-month, oh man, I got to grapple with this. So, yes. I like to think I was very strategic, but I don't know if no, we did. I mean, I tried to negotiate to get chunks of ownership, and I wanted the ownership because I'm like, I think we can grow a lot more, and I want to learn from these Bay Area guys, for instance, or the Career Builder people, and God really blessed it, right? Because it gave me a lot of cash to be able to go do other things. I own a bunch of commercial real estate. I'm doing a housing development in Moscow. Don't do a housing development. But I am doing one. It's terrible. But commercial real estate's fantastic. I've got buildings all over Moscow. I was telling someone I like to play Monopoly, and I like to play real Monopoly, with buildings. But holding on to ownership was actually a huge blessing. Gives you skin in the game, kept me engaged, and I got to, follow the track all the way through. Yeah, I mean, it was something I said I need. If you want to keep me here, I want to not just be a salaried employee. I want to be a person who's owns a chunk of the business. So, yes. Mm-hmm. So if you put in $6 million and you get 70% of the business, and it sells for, to keep the math easy, $16 million, which means the value of the business doubles, then you just took your $6 million and it's worth $12 million. Cool. But if you put in $4 million and you get 70% of the business and you use debt for the other piece, and then the business also sells for $16 million, you have just tripled your money rather than doubling your money, because the business is worth more and you still only have, the debt is only the $2 million. It doesn't grow exponentially with the size of the business, right? It's a fixed number with an interest rate, whereas the ownership grows exponentially with the size of the business. So when they went from $8 million to $40 million, the debt stayed at 2, and so their $4 million, which was 70 some odd percent of the business, is now 70% minus $2 million of a $40 million piece. And so it was just leveraging their capital better, so that they got a higher return on that. Does that make sense? It's tricky. There's spreadsheets. Timothy could explain it. I probably even explained it wrong. Maybe you could, just so you know, the talk tomorrow morning is going to be fixing all the things I made up on the spot. Yes? Yeah. They were just getting a loan. They were getting a loan. They actually went, because they had a bunch of assets, they could go get a really low interest loan, and then they made a loan to the business. Anyway, they made it complicated enough that they made a ton of money. But yeah, it was just using debt to leverage into it. And so there was kind of a debt capital thing. Yes. 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 This is in fact what Red Balloon does for a living. Part of the reason I talked about the values for our business is every business should know what they believe and not be afraid to say it. Because, and I'll just pick on ours, so bless the customer, bless the employee, bless the shareholder. Well, if you're asking someone, you're not allowed to ask them, hey, do you go to church? Or how old are you, right? Those are protected categories. You're not allowed to ask those questions. But you say, but you do want to ask open-ended, evidence-based questions. The point of an interview question is to gain evidence that they're going to be a good culture fit and a good skill fit, right? You're gaining evidence. You're not just hearing stories. So can you tell me about a time when you've gone above and beyond your job description to bless your fellow employee or bless a customer? Or what does it mean to bless a customer? Well, that's actually, you'd be surprised. For us, or Christians, we're like, oh, well, I can tell you that. You'd be surprised how hard that is if you don't have a worldview that allows for that. And so we tell all of our businesses, don't be afraid of articulating your values in the interview process. You can talk about yourself all you want. You can't ask them if they go to church, but you can say, hey, I'm a Christian and I'm running this as a Christian business. It's not a prerequisite. It's not a weird thing, but just so you know what you're getting into, right? You can talk about yourself all you want. Now let's talk about our values. What does it mean to you to go above and beyond? Or what does it mean to you to bless? So you can talk about yourself and ask questions, gain evidence from them, ask them stories about how they've done that kind of thing in the past. And it is amazing if you meet a Christian and you're like, hey, I'm a conservative Christian CEO and this is how I run the business. It is a very rare Christian that won't come back with, I'm a Christian too, right? Because all of a sudden it's okay. You just said the awkward thing out loud. And if they're not, right? So there you go, little trick. Yes. Yeah, no, it's a great question. And whether you're an artist or whether you're just, you need to, my encouragement is you need to find someone to start the business with. And I've seen a lot of successful businesses. The Bay Area company that I work for was started by 4 guys. It was a guy who was a CFO, a guy who was clearly a CEO. He was a football player. He was a leader. And then a guy who was an engineer and a guy who was a sales guy. Honestly, it was the four of them, and they kind of were like the whole business. They're like, hey, let's start this business together. And they were wildly successful doing that until they took .com money and went out of business later. But and so don't be afraid to find someone who you actually trust, and man, you got to trust that person, because I've seen so many of those go totally sideways. But as long as you totally trust them and their skills complement your skills, there's nothing wrong with starting business with somebody else.
He's engaging. That's good. There's lots of questions. What do you want to finish still?
But come back tomorrow.
Come back tomorrow. So we're gonna end tonight. Thank you.
Yep.